good morning or good afternoon, depending on your location. Let's wait to see if we've got everyone tuning in. I'm in Austin, Texas. Tomek is here with me. He's in Wrocław, Poland. We're going to go through some of the updates, but we've got 60 people already. I didn't see this coming. So we're going to go through some of the data around Google AI overviews, previously SG. We'll go through the first checks from 3 verticals that we've managed to refresh throughout this week. And exciting. So I'll wait for everyone to join. It's going to be more of a round table. Brent, hello, you're on the other side today. How come? We'll basically go through some of the basic data, some of the stuff we know, some of the conversation, discussions, questions, concerns, and then we'll be open to questions. I'm assuming this is going to be a majority of this webinar. We're playing it by ear. It was a very rapid development of this slide deck and everything else, so bear with us. We have some cool examples. So if you're tuning in on YouTube, type in the chat if you're here with us, so we know you can hear us and we can slowly get going. Oh, Maxirek. Hello, Zgiesh. I love it. We've got some cool SEOs in the crowd. So maybe a little bit as a warm up. First of all, where are you from? But then secondly, did you see any impact from overviews? Was your brand affected? Do you have any keyword or query that you saw, or anything interesting? You have anything that's fun to listen to, interesting, throw it in the chat. Let's get this started. Canada. Oh, we've got Canada. Amazing. We had a little bit of a tornado here this night, but it went past. It was like 80 miles from me, so I'm glad I made it today. Munich, Germany. Oh, Dirk, hello. SG is not live. Warsaw, amazing. East Hampton, wow. Oh, Stuart, hello again. Okay, guys. Germany, no SG there yet. Yes, I think we can slowly get going when everyone is tuning in. I don't love to wait for 10 or 15 minutes at the webinar when I'm tuning in. So let's get going. Let me share my screen. Hopefully this is gonna work out. Again, the slides today, don't expect explosions. We're going very, very basic on the design side to push this out so quickly. So very, very quick round of intros. Myself, I'm a founder of Onely and ziptight.dev. Over the last year, me and Tomek, we've been leading research on Google AI overviews, previously SG. Thank you, Google, for making our life a little bit more fun with changing the name. Tomek here is I think one of the smartest SEOs on the planet. He's advisor to Bing. He's author of multiple books, winner of awards for most innovative SEO. Tomek, help me out. Tech Boost, was it research?
That was a research competition. Research was about JavaScript SEO.
Yeah, and he's doing all of this while traveling all around the planet, hiking and being in a different location every week. I talked to him, so we've got Tomek with us. And without any further ado, let's go into the data. So AI overviews. And this is where I want to start with. So looking at the very, very big picture, what does it mean? I'm going to switch off the deck for a second, switch off the slides. So first of all, we've got some first data, and with SG being between, I think 50-60% with one of the verticals, which was finances, but the average was around 80 to 90% coverage for all of the queries. So what we've seen, Google scaled this down dramatically. But what we see very clearly in the initial data set, I hope this is not something that I'm going to have to correct once we find something else, but previously we had Google SG or Google AI overviews results divided in 3 categories. We had forced results, where you had to press generate, you had to physically press the button. Then you had automatic SG results, when you search for something, boom, a result shows up straight up. And then the last one was basically no AI overviews, no SG. I'll probably switch to AI overviews over time. So so what we've seen back, last year and over the last months, disappeared to the degree when now we have either we have SG, we have AI overviews in SERPs or not at all. So the forced results, this is what disappeared from search. So that's one. That's the first critical change, where the number of automatically generated results declined a bit. Where we see the most difference, the most change, the most shift is these so-called forced or opt-in results. So that's the first thing. They disappeared, and that's like the biggest change, number one, because right now, depending on the vertical, we're looking at 16%, 10% coverage of Google SG AI overviews for queries, when in again it was up to 90% 3-4 months ago. Yeah, so that's the first major difference. The second one that we've noticed in e-commerce, and we're waiting for more data, Ecuador, amazing. So, hello, Andrea. So the second data point, and this is just my theory at this stage, that this might be the why, but the data is correct, and that's we see a massive drop of SG coverage for high PPC queries. So when we had 97% coverage for $5 and up per click queries within Google AI overviews, now we're looking at, and I would have to double check, but it's below 10%. I think it was 6. I tweeted that yesterday, and it kind of flew out of my brain. But it basically dropped down the most where the cost per query is high. And the last announcements from Google are very clear. They say, okay, we're going to add that option to have ads within AI overview. So I'm assuming with that next step, we can see the coverage to be increased. So that's about the coverage. And let's go through one more data set from the e-commerce vertical. I'm still, I think we might have it from publishers as well, but let's go through the next step, which is quite interesting. 80% of sources for e-commerce queries are not showing within top 10. So that basically continues to show us, okay, the algo is different. And e-commerce is a very specific vertical. And let me maybe explain the first point first. So when you search for something within e-commerce and you see Google AI overview, you've got sources on top or sources within the content. When you drop down with a little arrow, you see different URLs, different pages explaining that query or giving you some extra information. These do not rank organically within top 60, or basically as deep as you can scroll, in 80% of the cases. So that's really interesting, giving you, and I'm not sure if you can, not sure if you can see that. Let me stop sharing. That's again my mouse. So explaining that is in e-commerce, when we see Google AI overviews, usually the info above the product is a little bit different than product itself. So we were thinking, okay, is it just e-commerce? Is it also visible for other verticals? And obviously for publishers, this is a bit exaggerated. So sorry, for e-commerce, it's a bit exaggerated. Let me share my screen again, and I'm gonna make it clear and easy to understand, I promise. So this is probably closer to real user intents than e-commerce, which is again a bit skewed in how AI overviews are structured, because we have explaining of what the mountain bike is and what it does and what you can do when you select the mountain bike in the sources, but the products are below. So this is a bit different than seeing just category pages for mountain bikes. That's why we see 80% in e-commerce. Tomek, do you want to add something here before we go into publishers? Sorry, I've been...
No, I think that it's pretty clear. I just would like to go back to your first data point, that in the past, like even like 1 or 2 months ago, SGE, I mean now it's AI overview, but before it was called SGE, appeared for 80% of the queries. And now we can see that there is a huge decline in the number of AI responses. And what do you think that why it happened? Why we see such a decline?
Are you asking me or the audience, Tomek? That's the question.
I mean, I'm asking you or the audience. I just curious. What's your opinion and what we
So one
can
thing
learn from this?
so we can start by a little bit of educated guessing. So I would assume Google removed some of the queries from AI overviews where they had lower certainty of the score being useful. That's basically how search works. All the conspiracy theories aside, all the anger from the SEO community aside, we're trying to just basically look at the data here. That's probably the number one, the key reason for that. The second one we're seeing is the lack of forced results. Google didn't roll these out, and it might be that they either will implement them again, introduce them again, or basically they will slowly increase the auto-generated AI overviews. And there could be a number of reasons that we won't guess from the outside looking at how that looks like in search, but most likely I would assume some factor of that is when you do a product launch for a company that's doing billions of dollars a year, I wouldn't try to create a massive disruption. So we have the ads, AI overviews don't have ads, so that affects the bottom line of Google at this stage. Generating AI
Okay.
overviews is 10 times more expensive than regular results. So there are a lot of factors making that a slow launch from Google and making that a logical call with billions and billions and billions of queries. So that would be my guess. So for lack of forced response, some kind of certainty of these results being useful or valid, or some kind of feedback they got from labs, from user interactions, and then PPC. So these would be a few of these. And then looking into e-commerce, we see 80% coming back to this topic. 80% of sources don't show up organically for the same query. But when we look into publishers, please work PowerPoint, this is probably a bit more valid, or very, very valid, because within publisher vertical, the intent of the query is the question is in the chat. The question we got in the chat: 80 versus 50%. Can we assume that 30% difference in this taxonomy versus products? In a way, yes. So explaining that in as simple as I can. Sources within e-commerce queries, transactional queries, where you have product listings underneath the AI overviews or within the AI overviews, usually are meant to explain the product or show you some pointers, some tips. So usually when I again search for a mountain bike or I don't know, headphones, it's going to give me, for some of these very broad queries, some kind of extra information on top, which when we look into organic rankings, we'll have category of bestbuy.com with headphones, category of amazon.com with headphones. So these sources will be different. They have different purpose. Within publishers, on the other hand, this user intent is understood the same throughout the whole journey. So when I search for what is Temu, my example from previous webinars and from last year, my intent is the same for AI overviews, and my intent is the same when I want to see the content I'm reading. I've got a question, I need to solve this problem. What is this? And then Google AI overview and SERPs will address the same intent in the same way. So what it shows here, and that's something we've been preaching for a bit now, is AI overviews, previously SGE, they don't look at URLs, they look at content, they look at answers. So it's a shift from content is king, that in my opinion is dead for a bit, to answer is king, because we don't wanna interact with I'll answer that in a second. We don't have our attention span is not boundless, and usually when I have a very simple question, my expectation from a search engine, from ChatGPT, from Perplexity, from Bing AI, is give me this answer in a simple way, and don't make it longer than it has to be. And I think we all somehow want to have interactions with the web in this way. So that's the main difference, because when AI overviews fetch a little bit of content from your website, they don't fetch the whole page. They fetch, Tomek, we had some average number of words. I don't remember. Let's just assume it's no longer than a medium length paragraph of text, or maybe short paragraph of text. and that paragraph has to answer the query. And I can show you an example. I think that might be a good segue to look into. Yeah, Michał, that's okay. We'll answer all of the questions. Keep the questions coming. No worries. I'm getting excited when I see questions. I'll contain myself for a bit. But let's go and let's have a look into practical example. This is time.com. And it's interesting because as a publisher, they somehow fit within the average of 15% inclusion. Let me zoom in a bit. And we track them for months now. So out of 1,000 top queries that drive traffic for time.com, we fetch them from Ahrefs. This is not a client of ours, just to be clear, we're not showing our clients' data here. This is just a public, this is all public data. And we can see, okay, out of this 1,000 queries, they have 152 AI overviews. But let's look into a very specific example, and let's see how we can fix it. I feel like this is also useful. So the Timo example is actually something I like to use. It's the cleanest way to get this across. So if we look into this query, what is Timo? We can see that organically, time.com was ranking in position 2. Now it's again number 1. So if we look into this very query, again, time.com is on top. And we can see the sources, and we can see exact fragment of text. I have to switch my mouse to zoom in again. And if you look into these fragments that Google AI overviews fetched, you can see a pattern. My intent is to know what is Timo. I have no idea. And basically, it shows a very clear answer within the content. That's one paragraph, and that completely answers the question. Obviously, the more the better. And usually we can see no, Timo is not a scam. So we can see some conversation regarding the follow-up questions that actually now Google AI overviews don't show, but with the SGE implementations, we saw that the first follow-up question, and we can actually fetch an older result for a second just to show you how this looks like. And that's gonna, I guess, help. Is it loaded? Yeah. So the follow-up questions basically showing, okay, this user intent usually ends up with this question showing up. Is it safe? Is it safe? You know, all of these 3 questions, if we come back to the latest check from 2 days ago, we can see that these are addressed within these fragments. So a lot of these fragments are not directly answering the question, what is Timo? But I'm assuming AI overviews or LLM that's behind it, large language model is going through some other intents to basically create a comprehensive answer. But anyhow, that's the question to one lead team. Carolina, will there be a recording? We got this question. Carolina, if you could let them know in the chat. I'm assuming there will be a recording. Just let's make sure that I'm not putting Caroline in a bad position here. Anyhow, so looking into these answers, you can see this is basically as clean of an answer as possible for this very query. But now if we open time.com, again, ranking number 1 all the time for the past few months that we track it, let's see if they answer the question of what is Timo, and that's going to more or less show you what's the difference between what we see in the top versus the URL ranking. So if we look into this paragraph from the LLM perspective, okay, we need a fragment of text that answers this question in a conversational manner. So Timo is a marketplace selling whatever. I don't know that well. So if you look at this paragraph, it's not structured as an answer, it's structured as a story. It's kind of vague for me to understand what Timo is from that fragment. So what AI Overview did is they basically ignored time.com, even though it ranks number 1. Again, it's time.com, and fetched some other websites, some other fragments to generate this fragment of text here. Reading, Temu is an online marketplace that sells discounted consumer goods directly from manufacturers in China to buyers worldwide. And I guess this one fragment is the best possible answer you can get. And also it answers some of these questions from follow-up questions that, again, Google didn't roll out with this release, to my knowledge. Maybe there are some, but usually I don't see them. So coming back to maybe let's have a little bit of a pause and see if there are any questions. So this is the difference between sources on top. Sources fetch answers, not all of the content. They don't care about the whole URL. They care about that fragment of content that's useful for LLM to generate a short snippet that terminates this query. We've got a lot of other questions in the chat. Let's gather them for later. Carolina, if you can maybe gather them for the later stage. I am assuming this is clear. So that's why we see, especially within the, let's go back to the deck, within the vertical space. I have to change my mouse to be able to zoom out. Here we go. If we look into this data point, 53% of these sources on top don't come from top 10. And that's where it actually gets interesting. Tomek, I'm assuming, is it from top 10? Yeah, sorry. So if we look at this example, what is Timu? Again, time ranks number 1. I'm assuming NordVPN, that's one of the sources, is not ranking for this whatsoever, but it has the answer. So that's how we have to look at this. That's how we have to understand it. These two algos, so search, when you show 10 blue links or 7 blue links, and LLM-powered search, they have different goals, different objectives, and different algos. Search has to show you an article or a piece of content that terminates the overall query best, but LLMs are not limited to only that. Tomek, do you have anything to add? I feel like this is something that's critical to understand with all the stuff I'm hearing online, but do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's crucial to understand that those are totally different algos and totally different approaches on how to get to the top. Because and also what's it's not only about, okay, let's try to understand two different algos, but also it's a possibility, it's an opportunity for many businesses which don't rank in top 10, because this way they can get to the top of search results without, let's say, using SEO optimization, because like the old SEO optimization, by using the new SEO optimization, they can get to the top. So yeah, whatever you use, you can get to the top.
And you see, this is a conversation we're having for almost a year now, and this questions very often come up, and I'm grateful they do. So, Gil in chat asked, and I think I can pin it here, that the content that is easier for Google to digest, and it has the best EAT. So I have to agree with the first one. But if we look at that EAT and all these other metrics, there is no data at this stage clearly supporting that these metrics drive inclusion. I'm assuming that there is some kind of quality aspect to it, but in my experience, what very often is a conversation within the SEO community claiming, okay, it's easy to spam Google AI overview sources. That's probably true. We can get something within Google AI overview sources within hours. I would argue whether it's spamming. Google doesn't have enough content online that clearly answers users' queries. And I think we've all seen that. You search for what's the best road bike, and you've got this biography of the blogger, and then you've got 45 minutes article. And that's not how we interact with the web anymore. Looking at the data interactions with GA4s of our clients, looking at the data of publishers, the content that we produce very often is not directly answering the question. It's made to have 500 words or X amounts of letters, or to cover whatever. It's not really, in a way, what's the simplest, shortest way to answer this question, and anticipating the next place within that journey. So if I'm searching what is Timu, I'm gonna probably ask, is it safe? Why is it so cheap? Where do they ship from? Can they return that product? You can expect that. And if you structure your content about that user journey, if you fall in love with your users, you can call it spam. And probably some people will use that for spamming for a time being. That's how this how that's how search works for years. But I feel like this is a very good shift because, again, looking at the hard data of interactions, we don't read 45-minute articles. When we have a very quick question, probably in a different tab, I have opened Timu app, and I'm searching for, I don't know, some gadgets to open a bottle of wine, and I'm quickly searching on Google, what is Timu? Give me the answer. Like that's usually how I would understand that. If my question is, what is the last revenue from last year from Team on predictions on the stock market, probably I would read a little bit more. So that's more or less how I would tackle that topic.
And part of the question was if Google AI Overviews is choosing websites, pages with the best EAT. It's not always the case. I would say Reddit, Quora, they're very common sources for AI overviews. Plus, I can see lots of answers from authoritative websites, which are not topically related. So it's, as I mentioned, it's totally different algo, and yeah, it's not always about EAT.
And I love the follow-up, Gil. I appreciate your questions. Keep them coming, guys, by the way. So the question is showing, again, the same. I feel, I don't want to be judgmental in any way. That's not about that. I just want to make that point very clear, that when we look at content, we don't look at URL anymore. So like we have to have like a power washer in one ear and like the water is like sprinkling out of the second one, basically with that intention. Okay, the whole URL doesn't matter. It's just a fragment of text. So your content, and you've seen that if you Google what is Timu right now, you will see the sources. They're very often covering like not really this very intent, but the fragment of text has to. So what we've seen in the research is actually one of the examples I use as a follow-up, how to reheat a steak. That's from Arthur from our team. And the sources were fetched from articles that weren't directly talking about steaks, which would be a default solution when we look at organic results with Bing or Google. I'm searching how to reheat the steak. I will see an article about reheating the steak. In Google AI overviews, what we've seen is Google would fetch these fragments of text from content talking about, other forms of cooking rather than the steaks. I don't remember. Let's say like brisket articles or articles about, saving food or whatever. But the fragment was very, very well addressing the question. And until the web is somehow satiated with a number of short answers to short queries, I feel like we're going to see a lot of websites randomly showing up within Google AI overviews just because someone wrote it clearly. Yesterday, I tweeted an example of Japanese content showing up for the query, "The future is female." And that was interesting because that Japanese snippet was translated to Google AI overviews clearly, but that was one of the best answers to that query, explaining the origins of that term. So if you look at that and we somehow disconnect ourselves completely from URLs, from EAT, from all these other aspects, and just think, okay, what this user wants and how to serve it, that's what this AI algorithm is designed to do. That's one thing that this algo has to do, answer the query, and that's it. So it might be simpler than we think sometimes, and I hope this makes sense for you. So yeah, shorter answers are better, just to answer Gil's question. But I'm just thinking, okay, within your content, probably I wouldn't create an article, what is Timu, with one snippet, but just understand this journey and have one snippet of text that will tackle the question. That's a good one. So answering user question in the content to get what is Timu is that it is different because featured snippets are fairly limited. They're limited to a few things. One, they don't rewrite the content. So even when we've been optimizing for featured snippets, researching featured snippets have to take content one by one and show one source, which is, from a user perspective, is not optimal. So that's one, because featured snippets have one source, they point you to one website. I would say that AI overviews, and that might be unpopular opinion with what's happening over the last week, 2 weeks ago these conversations were a bit easier, are designed for that a little bit better. So featured snippets don't rewrite content, a little bit different. They don't go through the journey as well. AI overviews, and I believe this is going to come back, were designed for all of the user journey. So AI overviews were drastically good at predicting your next click and creating that journey in a very addictive almost way. So when I would search like what's the best road bike for my weight and whatever very long query, the follow-up question would be exactly what my next step would be. So Google has the most data on the planet from user interactions, and they use machine learning, not AI, I'm assuming here yet, but machine learning to predict your next step. And I think AI overviews will do just that. So when you have a problem, again, what is Timu? They will guide you through the whole journey very quickly. But yeah, there's some similarities to featured snippets, no correlation in the data where featured snippets show up. I think it was stomach 1% of AI overviews in the last checks, but even right now in the check from e-commerce yesterday from our R&D at Onely, we've seen almost no correlations with featured snippets. So featured snippets are, as you can see, probably if Google had more featured snippet, they would show it, but they're fairly limited compared to AI overviews. That's a good question, and thank you, Blum X. Yeah, Tomek, content is king. Come on.
As always,
So I'm wondering whether we should go through the deck, but let's go into one more data point before I answer more questions. But I love that there are so many of them, and I would like to leave you guys with some sense of clarity and peace, because optimizing for overviews is super easy and it's fun once you have the data. Shameless plug of ZipTie, but you don't have to use it. I just highly recommend it. Anyhow, looking into the tweets, screenshot of my tweet, that's so far the best documented data point we have. This is aggregated data from ZipTie, from a lot of queries, but this is a mix of different verticals. So just have that in mind. That might not be the most representative sample, so some of these might be 1-2% off. But anyhow, we can see that Google was slowly decreasing the number of forced SG or AI overviews since February. So they were declining by 10% month over month. And then on the day of launch, or just before the launch, the number of force, so basically where you had to press generate overviews, declined dramatically to be completely removed as of this week. We couldn't spot. If any of you saw like generate button in overviews, let us know. We couldn't find any. Actually, our development team at Wandy was fairly sure that we must have missed something in the code, but that wasn't the case. But what you can see, basically most of the drop was in the red zone. So basically Google decreased a lot of forced results. But even when we look at default, so auto-generated AI overviews, again, in the e-commerce sample, we've saw massive correlation with high PPC queries. So again, my assumption is that we also lost some of these. There are probably some other factors we could look into. But looking into these data points, this was severely reduced from what was in production versus testing. So that's more or less how it looks like. My prediction is that we're going to see this trend go back up. And looking again into let's compare it to websites right now before I jump into. So let's make this data practical. What do you think, Tomek? Washington Post.
Let's do Washington Post.
Again, not a client of ours. We tracked them for 3-4 months just to understand the trend. There is nothing either good or bad about them here. Just the data. So right now, and Washington Post, if I remember correctly, had something around 35% coverage within AI overviews a few months ago. Now it's 6%. So you can see, depending on the queries you have, this is going to change. So in this case, there is 62 out of 1,000 top queries driving traffic to Washington Post, 62 auto-generated AI overviews. We can just say overviews nowadays, but they're only visible for 15 out of these 62. So that's Washington Post. But when we compare this with time.com, remember 6% for Washington Post, 15% for time.com. And we've seen e-commerces with 3% coverage within AI overviews, and we've seen e-commerces yesterday. We have a lot of, as you can imagine, people reaching out to us nowadays. And we've seen websites with 30, 40% coverage. So even though we're looking at averages, depending on your queries, not even on your vertical website very often, depending on the queries, this is the same vertical for Time and Washington Post, this is going to be a little bit different. So everyone is going to be affected differently. And the last data point, and Tomek, do we have that out of these percentages, the percentage of traffic is also different than percentage of queries. So we can also dive into that at some point. But let's go through some of the questions. Or maybe, what do you think, Tomek? Or more questions or more data?
I mean, it's good when we are on the webinar. I guess it's good to get the questions from the users, from the people who
Okay,
watched,
so one last
and
data
answer
point.
them. And
One last data point,
Okay.
and we can switch completely to questions. Because guys, we'll run a longer webinar next week. We have a lot of data incoming, but getting that out of our Excel sheets and CSVs and files into the deck will take a bit longer than a day. But that's something I wanted to show. Excuse the ugly slide. These numbers were never this steady in the checks we've been running since June last year. So it's also quite interesting to see almost the same numbers. And I would have to fetch the deck from like 2 months ago. But even if you Google search engine journal SGE verticals, my article from 3 weeks ago, you can see how different these verticals were, like completely different. So now we can see that Google only launched a specific percentage for each of the verticals, more verticals coming up this week and next week, but it's fairly similar for this table. And that's also showing me that there is a little bit of capping or threshold on the number of queries they are going after. So that's just one last thing I wanted to share. We'll share detailed data per this vertical today and tomorrow, but that's interesting. Okay, let's go through questions. Okay, let's go from the top. So as a source, we mean URL. Have you got any data on domains? Yeah, we do. Like just like what we're doing with Washington Post and Time, we do have data on domains, but it's almost impossible. And we were trying to show winners and losers per vertical, but it wasn't really statistically okay, and I wouldn't do it, because we need to look at what queries drive traffic to Time, what queries could drive traffic to Washington Post, and see within their own vertical how many queries, what's the coverage, rather than looking at the sample of queries from publishers and then pointing out who won and who lost. That wouldn't be the best approach unless you have like millions and millions of queries. So we have the data per domains within ZipType, but we have to check that again per domain. It's quite difficult to do it at scale because every single request we do comes from a logged in Gmail account. Okay. Let's see if we. So yeah. So I think this is fairly clean to answer. This was already tackled, but I'm going to say it again. I feel like the repetition here is critical for some of these. So Google will rank still a lot of websites top 1 or top 2. And time.com example and What is Timu is very good. So when you search for What is Timu, article from time.com, when we look at the whole page, it's probably one of the best choices. You can read the whole article. It shows depth and angles and whatever. But Google AI overviews are designed to do something different. They're designed to answer your query very quickly. And you can still expand into the sources. So I feel like these are two different ecosystems, different approaches. And I'm 100% sure that once Google gets click data, this is still going to be evolving. Either Google or Bing, none of these players, ChatGPT, nobody knows what's going to work long term with how fast this is going. And I think they've even said it multiple times. Critics argue Google's action constitutes social engineering. Tomek, do you want to take this one from Alexander?
I don't have the answer that is approved by my PR team.
That's true.
I need to talk
But
to my lawyer.
let's try to unpack it. So, social, and there's definitely some social engineering. I'm assuming every single product with 2 billion users, they have to somehow affect their users, educate them. Whether it's good or bad, that's a whole other topic. I don't want to comment on that. Manipulating user behavior. Yeah, if we look at that, I would expand this to basically every big player in the market, from Facebook, Instagram. Like, basically, I feel like this is somehow the reality we are in. I don't love it. I don't love a lot of stuff that both Google and other players do on the market. We, me, Tomek, the whole Ziptie and Onely team, we made that our mission statement. We want to help you guys go through that. We want to give you the data. We want to show you how to optimize. Um, and I understand that there is place for these conversations. I just never felt like I can change a lot with these. So from my point of view, I would rather give you the data and show you how to get into AI overviews than than have these conversations, because I feel like I can contribute to the community a bit more. So that's clear. Yes, there's going to be recording. Thank you for the question, Federico. ET. Have you got any possibility to check in the future what's percentage of so Google announced, and I feel like this is a very good question. Google announced, and if someone has a link to this, either from my team or from the viewers, please paste it in the chat, that they don't plan to show AI overviews, clicks, and data as a separate view in Search Console. We have a path with GA4 to extract data and clicks from Bing AI, from Perplexity, from ChatGPT. Maybe there is going to be a way to fetch these fragments from Search Console. However, these fragments were present pre-AI overviews. So these fragments of text that Google is choosing. So there is going to be some kind of bias. When, what's a zero-click search? This is going to be tricky, but we have a comparison with paid. So we can also look, and this is something I'm going to publish this or next week at SEJ, Search Engine Journal. Hey, Brent, that we have the data on how PPC affects, so PPC price affects AI overviews inclusion. And that was a massive differentiator before. And again, I highly recommend going through our blog, reading some of the older SG articles. But when we had a chart showing PPC versus AI overviews, there was one that was $5 and more. So I think it was like 70-80%. One was 98%. That was $5 and more. So I don't think it was a coincidence in any data set something this big of a spike is interesting. It should go slowly up, but it didn't. So I would assume that Google very, very quickly will add AI overviews to higher PPC, higher cost queries. And yeah, I rarely do bets or predictions, but that's one, very visible in the data. If I didn't answer this correctly, please ask a follow-up questions. I'm happy to help out answering these. Yeah, again, looking at this query, featured snippet wouldn't be able to fetch. I feel like, especially at this scale, to fetch this many clear answers from your content. When we've been optimizing a lot of big brands now, our website, case studies for Google AI overviews, we've been shocked how badly the whole internet, not only us, we've been guilty of that as well, how badly we answer very quick, very short user intents. And that's something that featured snippets won't address by itself. Maybe in 2 years, after people now try to optimize for answers rather than more content, and Google, and I've been preaching that for years, Google and Bing, they have too much content, that's going to shift a bit. Do you think position on the paragraph inside? Vladimir, we haven't seen any correlation with this. Not that we've been specifically analyzing this very case, but even when you do any of the searches, very, very, very often, and I've spent thousands of hours with Google AI overviews or SG over the last year. Very often, even most of the times, the answer is not on top of the page, so it's buried somewhere within the content. Sometimes they even will fetch like two fragments of content from two places within the website. If you look at LLMs and information retrieval, that makes sense. They don't really care about the layout as much as Google would with the traditional SERP. Dennis, yes, Japanese result, that's scary. So I want to expand on that here. So looking at the Japanese results, when I put that on, when I threw it on Twitter, when we look at that, when you look at a lot of countries that don't have a lot of access to a lot of like fresh knowledge, even me, when I lived in Poland, a lot of news, a lot of I was like still I am into biohacking, a lot of weird passions. I would probably search for a lot of these topics in English studies. Most of the scientific studies would be published in English and so on. So even when we remove that language barrier, and not only through translation, which is now much better with AI, but through these snippet of answer showing you the answer from multiple sources from multiple countries, that's going to change the game for everyone included, from publishers to bloggers to everyone else. So I feel like this might happen at some point, and it's extremely exciting for me to see that. I'm a bit terrified with trying to optimize at some point, but that's interesting. This practical implication of
So Bartosz, I didn't get these questions, so maybe Michał
I think I
can
get it.
explain.
So yeah, the predictive part is basically trying so what Google is doing here with SG, and what we've seen, we had a lot of user journey related webinars in the past. Maybe Carolina, if we have recordings, we can throw them into the chat. We had a whole webinar about user journeys and SG. So why this is so addictive? Usually when you do research, you spend a lot of times because you get to the first point. Okay, what kind of bike do I need? But then you get, okay, what kind of brakes do I need? Or I don't know that much about bikes. But for me, researching a mountain bike here in Austin when I moved was a massive pain. I didn't know too much. But within Google SG back then, that journey was very streamlined and clean. So when Google sees 20 million people in different languages searching for the same query and what they do throughout the journey, it's very easy to predict the next step. If you do it within your or content, your own e-commerce store, and you do it well with predictive, suggestions or next step, or you create content based on this whole journey, that's very engaging. And if we want to compete with AI, that's how you have to structure the content. You cannot answer one part and just leave them hanging, because what they're going to do, if you answer what is Temu and that's it, they're going to go back to search and ask, okay, is Temu safe? But if you answer all of the questions, the whole journey, you will keep these users within your website engaged for a bit longer. Schema, at this stage, we don't see anything within the data. Again, this is a very streamlined, very simple algo, very easy to optimize for at this stage when you know the data. I'm sure schema plays a part, but at this stage, even if you have the best schema, but your content is not answering the query, that's going to be tricky, or if your technology is heavy. So that's something we skipped in today's webinar, but most of the data and most of the research from last year and this year showed that the number one inclusion factor outside of content, probably even more than content in some verticals, is how expensive your website is to render, because that's the biggest limitations for all the LLMs. Right now, about all the wars for NVIDIA or any other chipset on the planet. ChatGPT is playing with, is competing with Google and all the other players for computing power. So that's what we saw in the data as well, to our surprise, with information retrieval.
There could be one exception about schema. It's mainly about publishers who pay all the content.
Yeah. So can you recommend tools to find search queries volume based on key phrases or topics? I feel like if you understand how everything works, I would use Ahrefs. At this stage, we'll introduce some of that into the zip ties workflow within a month or so. But yeah, we usually go with Ahrefs or basically any tool around that. this is a whole other topic on finding the workflow, understanding user intent, not just for one query, but for a set of queries, follow-up questions, journeys, but all of the data usually I can find within Ahrefs. Yeah, I don't have any assumptions at this stage. I feel like people now have the same assumption for the query what is Timu, and the same assumption for the query how to change a tire on a road bike. And these two queries have different intent, different dwell time. And if I want to change a tire on my bike, I'll definitely interact with your content, with your YouTube video, with your images, with your blog. If my question is, again, what is Timu? I don't need to see your content most. And I feel that's a very, very fair deal for both sides. It might be unpopular, but I feel like a lot of websites go after traffic that's just creating these click traps. When I want to answer a very simple query, and you've been there probably many times, and then you land on the page and you have to scroll and scroll, and then you're like you still don't know. So I feel like these kind of user intents pages will go away. But when we publish a study about Google AI overviews, showing that for different verticals, I'm not worried about Google AI overviews like taking over my traffic and my data, because it's too long, like it's a long form content. You will want to see the charts, you will want to scroll through the page, hopefully, and see the content. So I feel like this is how this is going to play out. At this stage, everything is speculations, and I don't want to try to predict user behaviors on such scale. But definitely what we see and what I believe in, depending on a short intent, long intent, that's where the game is at. And I wouldn't really fight to be included for what is Timu, but I would definitely fight to be included for how to change a road bike, if this road bike's tire, if this is my business and I can monetize it somehow. Yes. It's almost always reformulated, not always. Let's just assume it almost always. Usually, we've seen, and Tomek has an article, 7 Deadly Sins of SG, if you want to Google it and check it out. Sometimes Google would steal your content one-to-one and even not show credentials, but that was last year. We've seen a lot of, ever since then, it improved, hopefully completely, again, hopefully. But I've seen some answers when some of the content was quoted word by word, verbatim. And sometimes they would even say like users on Reddit, user whatever on Reddit said, and an exact quote. So it depends. I'm assuming that if you have something that's a very, very good match, they will quote you directly in the text. Is ignoring the power of entity domain. Oh wow, Tomek, you have to answer to Mr. X. That's a big question. Isn't ignoring EAT and the power of EAT domain containing the content taken from the SG answer going way back to even the Panda update?
So it's not about ignoring a specific ranking signals. It's about trying to understand which signals are promoted to the AI overviews algo. But I'm not sure if Mr. X, if you ask about Google approach or approach of SEOs, because that are two totally different. I mean, from the Google's perspective, when they implement LLM, search engine, whatever you call it, it's more difficult to apply traditional ranking systems because it's about the specifics of how LLMs works. So I hope it answers that question. In terms of,
I feel like I can tackle it. So, Mr. X, and addressing you this way is kind of weird, but Mr. X, let's. So, what I think here is the underlying question: are we going to see a lot of spam in Google AI overviews?
Of course.
I don't know. We might. At this stage, I haven't seen like cases where there was spam. I've seen cases where the answer was completely crazy, but I also saw this in search. So if you search for something crazy right now in Google Organic, you will find whatever you search for. So I feel like sometimes this is a double-edged sword. So if you search for like some weird stuff, like a search engine is not supposed to be judging you and probably to some degree show you that weird stuff if it's safe for everyone involved. But at the same time, if we look at LLMs, I feel like the quality is much easier to assess. So in Panda times, and I've been there, I remember in Panda times these algos were kind of crazy. And we have to remember that until 2020, Google didn't understand content at all, and this is something they've said openly in the antitrust lawsuit. So what Panda was very very rudimental, very primitive in a way. And right now, if we look at AI overviews, I wouldn't really call them traditional LLMs, but they definitely use LLMs on the back end to understand the question, to know more or less what the answer is, and then find the best match from the web. Let's not lie to each other. They can definitely answer all of these questions, or maybe not the ones requiring freshness just from the database, cutting all of our traffic, but they want to match what they know about the topic with your intent. So they probably know what Timo is in Gemini. If you ask it to Gemini, it wouldn't have to do the search, but they want to show the sources so you can expand it. So I feel like there is some quality aspect within Google AI overviews. There has to be, but the problem of spam will exist forever. So we'll probably see some crazy examples over the next few weeks, but I'm sure that I hope that Google will quickly tackle these. So I feel like there's a lot of concern about spam showing up in Google AI overviews, which is probably correct. But at this stage, I would want to get most of the people owning a website, optimizing the website to the point where you can optimize and you can push that spam out. I feel like this is the approach that I'm more comfortable with. Spam is going to show up. So yeah, Michal, this is a whole other conversation. We don't sleep, Brent. But also when I hear you talking about Reddit, I'm also super excited. So what was the comment comment about Emmer? If you could guide us towards that, that's going to be beautiful, because I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
So I can take it. So the first there was a question about schema and its correlation to AI overviews, and then I replied that okay, there is no so huge correlation, but there is one exception: publishers. So if a publisher has a paywall, then you need to make Google see that content, and one of the ways is to use schema.org.
Yes. Schema for publishers. Beautiful. Okay, folks, any other questions? I can't believe it. We answered all of these. And I hope that some of you are still hungry for more data and knowledge and stats and stuff like that, like inclusions per vertical. We'll have this going on next week. We also want to have a weekly onboarding session to ziptie.dev. We can if you joined in here, Carolina, if we have any special offer for ziptie, we can paste it in the chat for all the listeners. But there is more stuff coming. We're analyzing a ton of data. We've been preparing for this for a while, but I didn't want to refresh any of our samples until we were sure that this is live data. There is one more topic that's showing up and we're researching. Maybe some of you have examples, and I want to ask you a question before I leave. So did you see a different result for Google account with labs enabled versus Google account without labs? We switched off a lot of our accounts we use within ziptie to not use labs anymore, and we couldn't see any difference. And I know this is an ongoing conversation in the SEO community. At the scale of even 1,000 queries, no differences. There's always a little bit of difference when you search for something today and tomorrow with AI overviews, but at the same time of sampling, we couldn't find anything. So if you have anything like this, please reach out. ping us on our Slack, Carolina. Oh, Carolina, if you could maybe also add a link to our Slack community so the new people coming in can get some support through this journey. Thanks so much. Email us with questions. Sign up for a reduced price of ZipTie. I hope we still have capacity because what's happening with the accounts is just madness. So thank you so much for that as well. And if you have concerns, questions, you got blocked somewhere, please free to reach out to us at ziptie.dev, and we'll create content. We'll create something to enable you, to help you win through this revolution from a very loving place of a respectful place. So no conspiracy theories, please. We have some of our stories and internal conversation. We just feel like it's better for everyone here to focus on optimizing, helping our clients, helping our websites, and then seeing what's going to happen next. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a privilege helping you out today. We'll have more next week, and have a beautiful, beautiful almost weekend ahead of you if you're students. Tomek, any final words?
So
speechless.
From me, the final okay. From me, the final word is that yeah, I mean, it's not only about being scared of AI overviews, but it's about understanding how AI overviews work. And what I recommend doing for most of the people at the first step is to try to understand what AI overviews is looking for in terms of content, how they structure the answer, and then if you would like to get into this AI overview, then you need to adjust your content. It's like, it's not about specific skill. It's about observing how AI overviews is shaping the content, and then trying to adjust. Yeah.
And super lean technology. If you have JS-powered website that's client-side rendered, no chances in at least in our data set from a month or 2 months ago. So fall in love with your clients, with your customers, with your visitors. Make sure that you give them not a ton of content, but just how much they need. Sometimes it's a lot, usually it's a little. We're going through the same transformation. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful weekend once again, and Friday, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.